The sound of clinking glasses and the low hum of a crowded restaurant filled the air. The faint smell of grilled steak and garlic butter drifted through the corridors, mixing with the bitterness of freshly brewed coffee. A buzzing neon sign outside cast streaks of orange light across the tile floor. At first glance, this seemed like an ordinary evening at a mid-sized family restaurant, but beneath the surface, tension lingered in the air, thick and invisible, like smoke. Behind the bar counter, an exhausted waitress juggled 3 drink trays with trembling hands. Her name was Maria, 32 years old, single mother of 2, and working a double shift just to cover her rent. She wore a weary smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Every time she took an order, you could see the tightness in her jaw, the strain of someone trying not to break down under the weight of endless responsibilities. But towering over her was a sharp, piercing voice. "Maria, how many times do I have to tell you?" The manager snapped. "Table 6 has been waiting for 15 minutes. Do you want me to do your job for you?" That voice belonged to Charlotte, a tall, blonde manager in her early 30s, with heels that clicked like gunshots against the tiles and an expression carved from ice. She carried herself like royalty, hair perfectly styled, lipstick bold, her perfume heavy enough to leave a trail wherever she went. To her, employees weren't people. They were tools, replaceable, disposable. The staff looked at her with fear, not respect, and customers noticed. Some exchanged awkward glances when Charlotte's tone cut through the restaurant. Others whispered complaints under their breath. Still, no one said anything, because in this place, speaking up against Charlotte could cost you your job. And sitting quietly in the corner, dressed in a plain navy polo shirt, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, was a man who seemed ordinary. He didn't talk much, didn't draw attention to himself. He was just Matteo, a new recruit, supposedly starting as a line cook in the back kitchen. But what no one knew, not Charlotte, not even Maria, was that Matteo was not who he seemed. He wasn't just another employee. He was the CEO of the entire restaurant chain, working undercover to see what life was really like in his business. The kitchen smelled of burnt oil and onion. Heat radiated from the fryers. The sizzle of steak on the grill almost drowned out by Charlotte's voice barking orders. "Move faster, people. Customers don't care about your excuses," she said, snapping her fingers as though the cooks were machines. Matteo worked silently at the station, chopping vegetables, keeping his head down. But his sharp eyes noticed everything. The tears welling in Maria's eyes when Charlotte humiliated her. The cook with scars on his arms hiding them under long sleeves. The dishwasher limping quietly with no one offering help. Matteo could have spoken, could have ended it right there. But he didn't, because he wanted to see just how deep the rut went. And Charlotte was more than willing to show him. It started with the little things. A teenage busboy accidentally dropped a fork. The clatter echoed. Charlotte stormed over, snatched the tray from his hands, and sneered, "Pathetic. You'll never last here if you can't handle basic tasks. Do I have to hold your hand?" The boy muttered, "Sorry," cheeks red with embarrassment, and bent to pick up the utensils. She didn't help. She didn't even look at him again. Then Maria came in with a tray full of dishes. She asked, gently, "Charlotte, is it okay if I take my 10-minute break? I haven't eaten since." "Break?" Charlotte cut her off, rolling her eyes. "You think the world pauses for your break? No, customers first. Always." She turned to another employee. "If she walks off this floor, she's done." Maria's face tightened. She nodded silently and went back to her tables, stomach growling. And then the cook, an older man named Ravi, an immigrant from India, asked if he could swap one of his late-night shifts. His daughter had a school recital. Charlotte smirked. "This isn't a daycare. You either show up or you don't come back at all." Matteo watched Ravi's shoulders slump, his dreams of watching his daughter on stage slipping away. Each small cruelty piled up, brick by brick, until the weight became unbearable. By midnight, the restaurant thinned out. The hum of chatter was replaced with clattering dishes and the smell of bleach as the staff cleaned. Maria wiped down a table with tired hands, moving slower than before. Her back ached. She hadn't eaten in 12 hours. And yet, she forced a smile when a customer thanked her. Matteo approached her quietly. "You okay?" he asked softly, keeping his voice casual. She glanced at him, surprised. Yeah, just long day. He studied her expression. The exhaustion wasn't just physical, it was deeper, the kind that came from years of being undervalued. Seems like every day's long here, he said. Maria hesitated, then let out a small, bitter laugh. You have no idea. And she told him her story. Her husband had left 2 years ago. Rent was rising. Childcare was expensive. The only job she could find that fit her schedule was here. She wanted to be grateful, but Charlotte made it unbearable. She talks to us like we're trash. And if we mess up even a little, she threatens to cut our hours. I need this job. My kids need food on the table. So, I just take it. Her voice cracked, but she didn't cry. She swallowed her pain like medicine. Matteo's jaw tightened under his cap. He'd heard enough, but still, he stayed quiet. He needed to see how far Charlotte would go. The next day, lunch rush hit. The restaurant was full, the smell of fried food thick in the air. Customers were restless. At table 7, a couple complained that their food was cold. Charlotte immediately turned on Maria. This is your fault, she hissed, loud enough for customers to hear. You can't even handle simple orders? What's wrong with you? It wasn't me. Maria tried to explain, but Charlotte cut her off. Don't talk back to me. Charlotte snapped. If you can't do your job, I'll find someone who can. Customers fell silent, watching. Maria's cheeks burned with shame. She clenched her fist but said nothing. And then, Matteo spoke, for the first time. Excuse me, he said, stepping forward. His voice was calm, steady, but it carried weight. I think that was the kitchen's mistake, not Maria's. Charlotte turned, glaring at him. And who are you to speak? New guy thinks he knows better? Stay in your lane. But Matteo didn't back down. He held her gaze. His eyes, piercing, unflinching, seemed different this time. Stronger, more commanding. Charlotte frowned, thrown off for just a second. But then she smirked. Fine. If you're so smart, why don't you take care of the customers? She tossed him the ticket. Prove yourself. Matteo caught it effortlessly, and without a word, walked to the kitchen. Something shifted. Staff members exchanged glances. For the first time, someone had stood up to Charlotte. That evening, the restaurant quieted down. Charlotte strutted through the aisles, heels echoing. She stopped at Matteo's station. You, come with me, she ordered. They stepped into the back office, fluorescent lights buzzing above. Charlotte crossed her arms. I don't know who you think you are, but you don't get to challenge me in front of staff. One more slip, and you're done. Matteo leaned against the desk, arms folded casually. Then, he slowly reached up and pulled off his cap. Charlotte's smirk faltered, his face suddenly familiar, his voice now firmer. My name isn't just Matteo, he said evenly. I'm Matteo Rivera, the CEO of this entire company. Silence. Charlotte's eyes widened, her skin draining of color. W what? He stepped closer. I've been here undercover, watching, listening, seeing how my employees are treated when no one's watching. And you, Charlotte, you show me exactly what kind of leader you are. She stammered, trying to recover. I was just keeping order. They need discipline. No, Matteo interrupted. His voice thundered now. What they need is respect, humanity, support. You humiliate them, starve them of dignity, and call it leadership. But it's abuse. Charlotte's lips trembled. For the first time, she had no power. The next day, staff gathered before opening. Charlotte was nowhere in sight. Matteo stood at the center, no longer in disguise. This time, he wore a simple suit, not flashy, but enough to signal authority. I owe you all an apology, he began. You didn't know who I was, but I saw everything, and I can promise you this, things will change. He turned to Maria. You deserve better. From now on, breaks will be honored. Respect will be non-negotiable. And as for Charlotte, the staff leaned in. She's gone. Gasps filled the room, followed by relieved murmurs. A weight lifted. For the first time, hope bloomed. Matteo smiled softly at Maria. And you You're going to be promoted. You've shown more leadership in your kindness than she ever did in her authority. Tears welled in Maria's eyes. She whispered, "Thank you." Matteo placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "No, thank you for reminding me what real strength looks like. Leadership is not about power. It is about people, about lifting others when they are drowning, about respect when no one's watching." In Maria, we see resilience. In Matteo, we see humility. And in Charlotte, we see the danger of forgetting that every worker, every person, deserves dignity. The restaurant buzzed with new energy, laughter filling the air again. But in the distance, one lingering question remained. If one manager could cause this much pain, how many more were out there, hidden in other restaurants, other workplaces, abusing their power in silence? The story is not over. True leadership is not measured by the authority you wield, but by the compassion you show. A title may give you power, but only empathy earns you respect. To lead is to serve, not to command. And when leaders forget that, they risk losing everything. The restaurant doors swung open to a brand new day. Sunlight spilled across the polished tiles, catching the dust in golden streams. The air smelled fresher, lighter somehow. Without Charlotte's sharp heels striking the floor, there was silence, a silence that felt like freedom. But freedom comes with responsibility. Matteo, no longer undercover, but present as himself, walked through the dining area, greeting employees with a warmth they had never experienced from management before. No harsh commands, no sneers, just small gestures that meant everything. Asking about Ravi's daughter's recital, offering Maria a chance to sit before her shift began, listening more than he spoke. For the first time, hope filled the staff's eyes. Yet underneath that hope lurked something darker, because the cracks Charlotte left behind ran deeper than anyone expected. It began with the books. In the cramped office, Matteo sat before stacks of ledgers and spreadsheets. Paper smelled faintly of ink and dust. Numbers told a story, and it was one Matteo didn't like. Mismanaged funds, overtime hours unaccounted for, missing inventory, and employees paid less than what they were owed. Charlotte, he muttered under his breath. But it wasn't just her. No one person could hide this much without help. He closed the binder, leaning back. This goes higher. Meanwhile, Maria wiped down a booth, whispering to Ravi. "I don't think Charlotte was working alone," she said. Ravi nodded gravely. "I've been here longer." She had connections, suppliers who never showed invoices. And sometimes, tips disappeared from the pool. Maria frowned. "Tips? I thought." "They never reached us," Ravi confirmed. "Someone was pocketing them." The word spread among the staff like wildfire. Relief at Charlotte's firing began to mix with unease. If she wasn't the only one, who else was stealing from them? That evening, Matteo gathered the staff before closing. The smell of cleaning solution lingered, and the buzz of neon outside filtered through the windows. "I've seen enough to know the problem didn't end with Charlotte," he began. His tone was firm, but his eyes softened as they met each employee's gaze. "There's a rot in this system, but I won't find it alone. I need to know. Can I trust you to be honest with me?" Silence. Then, slowly, Maria raised a hand. "Yes, we've been waiting for someone to listen." Ravi stepped forward next. "We'll help." One by one, others nodded. The air grew heavier, a pack forming in that small dining room. Matteo exhaled. "Then we'll do this together." The next morning, a delivery truck pulled up behind the restaurant. The driver, a heavy-set man with tattoos running down his arms, unloaded boxes with a grunt. Matteo approached. "Morning. You're new." The driver smirked. "Not new, just less seen. Charlotte handled these." He shoved a clipboard toward Matteo. "Sign here." Matteo scanned the form. Something was off. The boxes were listed as premium cuts of steak, yet when he peeked inside, all he found were cheap, near-expired meats. Matteo's chest tightened. Fraud. The driver's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Everything's in order. No questions, right?" Matteo signed, carefully keeping his composure. But inside, his blood boiled. This wasn't just about mistreatment anymore. It was theft, exploitation, corruption woven into the supply chain itself. And Charlotte was just a pawn in a much bigger game. That night, while cleaning tables, Maria collapsed into a chair. Her hands trembled. She'd just received a call from her landlord. Rent was going up again. Her paycheck, already thin, wouldn't cover it. She buried her face in her hands, whispering, "I can't do this anymore." Matteo found her there. He crouched beside her. "Talk to me." Through tears, she admitted everything. The late bills, the night she skipped meals so her children could eat, the fear of losing her home. Matteo's throat tightened. He wanted to fix it immediately, but he knew throwing money at her wasn't enough. The real solution had to be deeper, systemic, something that would protect not just Maria, but every worker like her. "You won't go through this alone," he said firmly. "I promise you." And for the first time, Maria let herself believe him. But promises don't go unchallenged. The very next day, corporate headquarters sent a letter, a cold, formal notice. Matteo Rivera's to cease all direct interference with restaurant operations until further review. Someone high up wasn't happy with his investigation. Someone wanted him silenced. He crumpled the letter in his fist. Whoever was behind this corruption wasn't done. They were watching, waiting, and if he wasn't careful, Maria and the others would pay the price. Late that night, as the restaurant closed, Matteo stepped into the parking lot. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of rain. A figure leaned against a black car in the shadows, cigarette glowing in the dark. "You should have stayed out of this," the man said, voice low and menacing. Smoke curled around his words. "Charlotte was nothing. You just made enemies you can't see." Matteo froze, eyes narrowing. "Who are you?" The man flicked a cigarette, ember hissing against the wet pavement. He smirked, then slid into the car. As the engine roared and taillights disappeared into the night, Matteo stood alone under the flickering streetlight. The message was clear. This wasn't just about one restaurant anymore. This was war. And Maria, Ravi, and every other worker were caught in the middle. When one voice dares to stand against injustice, the world trembles. But power rarely surrenders easily. Behind every corrupt leader may stand a system designed to protect them. True change requires courage, not just from those in power, but from every worker willing to speak the truth. The road ahead will be dangerous, but silence is far more costly. The hum of morning sunlight filled the restaurant, slipping through the blinds in soft golden lines. The smell of fresh coffee lingered in the air as the staff prepared for opening. For the first time in months, there was no shouting, no tension crackling like static in the atmosphere. Yet quiet didn't mean peace. Charlotte was gone, yes, but the wound she left behind was still fresh. Employees who had been silent for years were now speaking cautiously, their voices unsteady, as if afraid that at any moment another tyrant might rise to crush them. Trust was fragile, and though Matteo had promised change, promises alone didn't pay bills or erase scars. At table 3, Maria adjusted a salt shaker with trembling hands. Her smile was practiced, but her eyes were tired. She had worked 3 doubles in a row, desperate to scrape together enough money for the looming rent hike. When a customer asked if the restaurant offered discounts, Maria's lips curled into a polite smile, but her chest clenched. She thought of her children at home, waiting with bowls of plain rice because groceries had run thin. Behind the counter, she whispered to herself, just one more shift, one more day. But no matter how many one more she survived, the mountain ahead only seemed to grow taller. Matteo, watching from a distance, noticed. He had an instinct now, eyes trained not just on profits and margins, but on people. He saw the way Maria's shoulders slumped, the way she rubbed her temples when she thought no one was looking. And it hurt him, because in Maria, he didn't just see an employee. He saw every worker who had ever been overlooked. In the kitchen, Ravi stirred a pot of curry with steady hands. He hummed quietly under his breath, a tune from his childhood in India, but the calm rhythm of his cooking masked something heavier. His daughter's recital had come and gone. He'd missed it, thanks to Charlotte's cruelty. And though she'd smile when he came home that night, saying, "It's okay, Papa," Ravi could see the disappointment in her eyes. The guilt gnawed at him like hunger. When Matteo asked him how he was, Ravi forced a smile. "Good, sir. Just tired." But Matteo wasn't fooled. He knew that behind Ravi's resilience was a man carrying more than his fair share of sacrifices. For weeks, Matteo had been caught in a tug-of-war. On one side, the corporate board wanted numbers, profits, margins, efficiency. On the other side were Maria, Ravi, and countless others who gave everything just to keep the restaurant alive. But Matteo knew one truth. A business wasn't just numbers. It was people. And if he lost sight of that, he'd become no better than Charlotte. Late at night, sitting in the empty dining area, he ran his hand over the smooth wooden tables. "How do I fix something that's been broken for so long?" he whispered to himself. The breaking point came one Friday night during a packed dinner rush. Orders piled up. The kitchen buzzed with chaos. Ravi's hands blurred over the stove. Maria darted between tables, sweat dripping down her temples. And then it happened. A customer complained, loudly, that their order had been wrong. But instead of understanding, they lashed out. "This place is a joke," the man shouted. "Do you even know what you're doing?" Maria froze, lips trembling. She wanted to apologize, but her voice caught in her throat. Before she could, the man slammed his hand on the table. "You don't deserve to work here." The words hit her like knives. All the exhaustion, all the nights of skipped meals, all the sacrifices, reduced to nothing in front of strangers. Her eyes burned. For the first time, she whispered, "Maybe I don't." The tray slipped from her hands, dishes shattering on the floor. The restaurant fell silent. Matteo appeared instantly, steady as stone. He looked at the customer, his voice calm but firm. "Sir, I understand you're upset, but you will not speak to my staff that way." The man scoffed. "Your staff? This girl can't even handle basic service." Matteo leaned closer, his tone sharper now. "She's not this girl. She's Maria, a mother, a worker, a human being who shows more strength every day than you could imagine. If you can't respect that, you're welcome to leave." The man sputtered, but the quiet conviction in Matteo's voice left no room for argument. With a mutter, he stormed out. Maria stood frozen, tears threatening to spill. She whispered, "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," Matteo interrupted softly, "because no one should be made to feel worthless for simply trying to survive." And in that moment, the staff knew this wasn't just a boss. This was a leader. Word spread quickly. Not just about Charlotte's firing, but about the night Matteo stood up for Maria. Customers returned, saying, "We heard this place is different now." Tips grew. Staff smiled more. Even Ravi hummed a little louder in the kitchen. But change wasn't instant. Maria still faced her rent increase. Ravi still bore the guilt of missed memories. And Matteo still fought against a corporate board resistant to his vision. Yet something fundamental had shifted. Hope, because for the first time in years, the staff believed someone was truly fighting for them. In every workplace, there are battles no paycheck can reveal. Battles against exhaustion, against loneliness, against a quiet voice that whispers, "You're not enough." But leadership is not about silencing those voices with empty words. It is about standing beside those who fight them every day. Maria still struggles. Ravi still sacrifices. And Matteo still fights against forces bigger than himself. But together, they remind us of a truth too often forgotten. Behind every uniform, every apron, every name tag is a story. And every story deserves dignity. When the weight of survival becomes too heavy, who carries the carriers? The night air was thick with the smell of grease and sizzling meat. Friday dinner rush. The kind of night where every table was full, every waiter's notepad scribbled with orders, and every second stretched into eternity. The restaurant floor pulsed with energy, laughter from some tables, complaint from others, the metallic crash of dishes stacking in the sink. Staff darted between customers like dancers in a chaotic ballet, each step critical, each movement frantic. But beneath the hum of activity, tension simmered, because when stress runs high, cracks begin to show. Maria carried a tray loaded with drinks, balancing them with the grace of someone who had done this 1,000 times. Her smile was steady, but her hands trembled. She passed Ravi in the kitchen window, who was drenched in sweat, flipping steaks and stirring pots as tickets piled higher and higher. 2 minutes on table 9, a waiter shouted. 3 minutes. Ravi barked back, his voice uncharacteristically sharp. Maria paused, glancing at him. She'd never heard him snap like that. His eyes were bloodshot, jaw tight. "Ravi," she whispered, "are you okay?" He didn't answer. He just turned back to the stove, muttering under his breath. And across the floor, a new hire, Lena, barely 19, working her first big shift, was struggling. She dropped a basket of fries, oil spattering her arm. She yelped in pain. Charlotte was gone, but the ghost of her cruelty still lingered, because when pressure built, the staff still feared mistakes. From the far corner, Matteo stood quietly, not in a suit, not in a cap, just present, watching, learning. He saw everything, the stress on Ravi, the panic on Lena, the exhaustion on Maria. The business was thriving again, yes, but the human cost was still heavy. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to step in immediately. A good leader knew when to act, and when to let his people show their own resilience. But that night, the storm would force him to act. It began with Table 12, a group of rowdy customers, half-drunk, loud, impatient. They snapped their fingers at Lena, demanded extra bread, then mocked her when she fumbled the plates. "Hey, Bobby," one man sneered. "Try not to spill it this time." Lena's cheeks burned red. She mumbled, "Sorry, sir," but her hands shook worse with every trip. Maria noticed. She whispered encouragement, even offered to take over, but Lena shook her head. "I can do it," she insisted, though her voice cracked. Then came the breaking point. A plate slipped. Food splattered across the table. The men erupted in laughter, one of them clapping mockingly. "Bravo! What a professional!" Lena froze, humiliated, tears welled in her eyes. And then Ravi, already on edge, slammed his spatula onto the counter so hard it echoed across the restaurant. "Enough!" he roared, stepping out of the kitchen. "She's trying." The room fell silent. Customers gawped. Staff froze. The rowdy man smirked. "What are you, the fry cook hero?" Ravi's chest heaved. His voice cracked, not with anger, but pain. "You don't know what we give up just to be here. You don't know what we lose. So shut your mouth." The man stood, fists clenching. The room buzzed with tension, seconds away from chaos. Matteo finally moved. Calm, steady, unflinching. He placed himself between Ravi and the customer. "That's enough," Matteo said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried like thunder. The customer scoffed. "And who the hell are you?" "I'm the one who decides whether you eat here again," Matteo replied evenly. A hush fell. The man faltered, then grabbed his coat. "This place is a joke anyway." He stormed out, his friends trailing behind. Silence lingered. Ravi stood frozen, chest still heaving. Lena wiped her tears. Maria exhaled in relief. And Matteo turned to his staff. He didn't scold. He didn't lecture. Instead, he spoke gently, so every worker could hear. "Listen to me. You don't deserve to be treated like that. Not by managers. Not by customers. Not by anyone." His eyes swept across the staff. "If someone mocks you, degrades you, or treats you as less than human, you come to me. Always." Maria's lips quivered. Ravi bowed his head, ashamed of his outburst. Lena sniffled quietly. Matteo walked over to Ravi, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "You're not wrong for standing up, but anger eats us alive if we let it. Don't carry this alone." Ravi nodded, tears threatening to fall. Then Matteo crouched to Lena's level. His voice softened. "You did good tonight. Mistakes happen. What matters is you came back stronger each time. That's courage. Don't ever forget it." Lena's shoulders eased for the first time all night. Later, as the last tables emptied and lights dimmed, Maria lingered by the counter. She looked at Matteo, her voice low. "Tonight could have gone so wrong. But you were here." Matteo shook his head. "No, we were here. Together." Her eyes softened, but worry still lingered. "What happens when you're not here, Matteo? When it's just us, facing all of this alone?" The question cut deep. He had no easy answer, because she was right. He couldn't be everywhere at once. And change wasn't just about one night. It was about building a culture strong enough to last even when he wasn't there. A workplace is not just walls and tables. It's the lives of those who keep it alive. And in the pressure of long hours and unkind faces, dignity is fragile. One cruel word can shatter it. One kind word can restore it. Matteo saved the night. But the question remains, can he save the spirit of this place forever? Or will the weight of survival eventually crush the people who carry it? The restaurant floor glowed under soft yellow lights. Chairs scraped, laughter echoed, and plates clattered against tables. On the surface, everything looked alive, buzzing, even hopeful. But behind that glow, something rotten stirred. Because betrayal never comes from strangers. It comes from those standing closest. Since the night Matteo stood up to the drunken customers, the staff had grown tighter. Maria, Ravi, Lena, they felt safer, more like a family. There were still struggles, yes, but at least they had each other. Or so they thought. In the corner, another waiter, Eric, polished glasses with unusual focus. He was in his late 20s, slick hair, sharp eyes. He'd been quiet during Charlotte's reign, rarely speaking up, always keeping to himself. But lately, he had begun watching, too closely. Watching Maria's mistakes, Ravi's exhaustion, even Matteo's every move. And every night, after closing, Eric disappeared quickly. Too quickly. Maria noticed first. He's always rushing out. Doesn't even say goodnight. Ravi shrugged, too tired to care. Maybe he has another job. But Matteo felt it too. That gnawing instinct in his gut, something was off. It began small. Maria overheard two new hires whispering. Did you hear? Matteo only promoted her because she cried in front of him. She's not management material. She's just his favorite. Maria's cheeks burned. She knew those weren't random words. Someone had planted them. Later, Ravi approached Matteo, hesitant. Some staff, they say you're making promises you can't keep. That the board is against you. That this hope is temporary. Matteo's jaw tightened. He knew whose voice was behind those whispers, even if it wasn't spoken aloud. Eric. The next Friday, tips went missing again. $100 vanished from the jar. Maria panicked. I swear I didn't. I didn't touch it either, Ravi said, his voice trembling. Suspicion spread like poison. Eyes narrowed, trust cracked, and in the corner, Eric smirked faintly, wiping down a counter. It wasn't until a week later that the truth came crashing down. Matteo received a call, corporate headquarters. A complaint had been filed. Anonymously, they accused Matteo of favoritism, of mishandling funds, of destabilizing the restaurant with reckless leadership. And worst of all, they had evidence. Photos of Maria crying, Ravi shouting, even Matteo confronting the drunk customers. Twisted, taken out of context, painted as chaos under his watch. Matteo's blood ran cold. Who would? Maria whispered, then stopped. Her eyes widened, darting toward Eric. And suddenly, it all made sense. His vanishing after shifts, his whispers, his smirk when tension rose. It wasn't just betrayal. It was sabotage. That night, after closing, Matteo found Eric alone in the office, sliding papers into his backpack. You working late? Matteo asked, voice calm, but heavy. Eric jumped, then sneered. Just cleaning up. Unlike some people, I know how to handle responsibility. Matteo stepped closer, eyes steady. You've been feeding corporate, stirring doubt, turning this place against itself. Eric smirked. Someone had to. You think this fairy tale leadership is going to last? Please, the board will eat you alive. And when they do, I'll be the one left standing. Maria and Ravi stood frozen at the doorway, listening. Maria's hands clenched. Ravi's face fell in disbelief. Matteo's voice dropped low. You betrayed them. Not me. The people who stand beside you every day. Eric shrugged. It's not betrayal. It's survival. Word spread quickly. Trust collapsed. Some staff defended Eric, saying maybe he was right. Others turned on him, furious. The restaurant floor, once healing, was now fractured again. And Matteo, caught between protecting his people and fighting a larger war with corporate, realized the hardest truth yet. The greatest danger wasn't just from outside, it was from within. That night, Maria sat at a booth long after closing. Her voice cracked as she whispered to Matteo, "If even one of us could turn like that, how do we ever trust again?" Matteo looked out at the dark, empty restaurant. His jaw clenched, his chest heavy. He didn't have an answer, because trust, once broken, is the hardest thing to rebuild. The camera lingers on Eric, outside under the streetlight, lighting a cigarette. His phone buzzes. He smirks as he answers. Yeah, he suspects. But don't worry, I've got more. When betrayal comes from within, survival becomes war. Workplaces are built on more than contracts and paychecks. They are built on trust. But when trust breaks, when betrayal poisons the air, even the strongest bonds are tested. Leadership is not just about guiding. It is about healing wounds that others deliberately tear open. And sometimes the hardest battles are not with enemies outside, but with a shadow standing right beside you. The morning after the betrayal, the air inside the restaurant was heavy. The usual chatter of staff setting up was replaced with silence, only broken by the faint clatter of silverware. But outside those walls, something bigger was already moving. Because corporate had been watching. Matteo sat in the tiny staff office, staring at the glowing screen of his phone. An email subject line burned at him. Urgent. Immediate review. Regional board meeting. His heart sank. He knew this wasn't routine. He knew Eric's poison had reached them. Maria hovered at the doorway. What is it? Matteo exhaled slowly. Corporate wants me in their office tomorrow. They're not wasting time. Ravi froze. That's bad, isn't it? Matteo didn't answer. He didn't need to. The next morning, the city skyline stretched sharp against the pale sky. Matteo, still in his undercover uniform, cap, polo, jeans, walked into the towering glass headquarters of the company he secretly owned. The lobby smelled sterile, like polished steel and overpriced coffee. Phones buzzed. Heels clicked. Every sound was controlled, efficient, cold. Behind the front desk, a receptionist glanced at him skeptically. Employee hearing, she asked flatly. Yes, Matteo said, keeping his cover. She slid him a badge marked temp access. Review. For the first time in years, Matteo was walking his own empire as an outsider. The boardroom was massive, walls lined with glass, a long table dominating the center. At the far end sat Mr. Halvorsen, a thin man in an immaculate suit, head of corporate compliance. His voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Mr. Matteo Alvarez, he began, not recognizing his boss in disguise, you've been accused of disrupting operational stability at the Riverside branch. Multiple staff complaints, customer incidents, financial irregularities. Care to explain? Matteo stayed calm. The incidents weren't disorder. They were signs of a broken culture. The manager was abusing staff. I saw it myself. Halvorsen's brow furrowed. That's not what we were told. In fact, one report suggested you instigated conflict, that you're creating division. Matteo's stomach twisted. Eric's fingerprints were all over this. Another board member, a woman with cold eyes, leaned forward. Your performance as a trainee is irrelevant. The point is, are you fit for this company at all? Each word was like a blade. Matteo knew this wasn't just a review. It was a trial. A screen lit up at the far end of the table. Images appeared, Matteo arguing with Charlotte. Matteo standing up to the drunk customers. Maria crying. Ravi slamming his hand on a counter. But edited, spliced, out of context, like chaos spiraling under his watch. Gasps filled the room. Halvorsen's voice sharpened. Do you deny this is your influence? Matteo clenched his jaw. Those clips are twisted. They don't show the abuse that caused those moments. They don't show the staff breaking under pressure. They don't show me stopping it. But the board members exchanged knowing glances. Doubt. Suspicion. The trap was working. As the questioning dragged on, a door opened. Someone new entered the room. Eric, wearing a pressed shirt, hair slicked, face smug. He carried a folder thick with papers. "I think my testimony will clear things up," he said smoothly. Maria's whispered warning echoed in Matteo's head, his always rushing out. Eric had been feeding corporate not just lies, but documents, receipts, selective truths. Enough to bury anyone. Matteo's blood boiled. His fists clenched beneath the table. But he couldn't reveal who he really was. Not yet. As Eric laid out his case, painting Matteo as reckless and manipulative, one board member asked quietly, "If this is true, why hasn't this come to light before? Why now?" Eric smiled coldly. "Because nobody had the courage to speak up. Until me." The room nodded, satisfied, and in that moment, Matteo realized something devastating. Corporate wasn't looking for the truth. They were looking for a scapegoat. After hours of grilling, Halvorsen finally leaned back in his chair. "We'll review this evidence," he said. "Until then, your position at Riverside is suspended, effective immediately." Suspended from his own restaurant, his own company. Matteo stood slowly, his cap shadowing his eyes. He could feel Eric's smirk burning into his back. As he stepped into the sterile hallway, his phone buzzed. A single text from an unknown number lit the screen. "They are not done with you yet. Next move, termination." When corporate turns against its own, the truth must come out. Power doesn't always sit in the hands of the strongest. Sometimes it sits in the shadows, manipulated, twisted, controlled by those who whisper in the right ears. But leadership isn't about surviving popularity contests. It's about holding on to integrity, even when the system tries to break you. And sometimes, the fight for truth doesn't begin in the streets. It begins in the boardroom. The sterile hum of the boardroom lingered like static in the air. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, their harsh glare reflecting off the long glass table. At one end sat Mr. Halvorsen, his narrow frame swallowed in a suit so dark it seemed to drink the light. Around him, 12 board members shuffled papers, adjusted glasses, tapped pens against polished surfaces. Their faces were masks, controlled, detached, unreadable. And at the opposite end sat Matteo, still in his undercover uniform, a simple polo shirt, dark jeans, and the cap that had shadowed his identity for weeks. To them, he was no one. A low-level employee dragged in for review. Disposable, replaceable. The air tasted metallic, like recycled air conditioning. The scent of sterilized leather from the chairs clung to the back of Matteo's throat. Every sound, the shuffle of papers, the faint creak of the boardroom door, seemed magnified. He sat still, hands folded, face calm. But inside, his pulse hammered like a war drum, because this wasn't just a meeting. It was an ambush. Mr. Halvorsen cleared his throat, his voice slicing through the silence. "Mr. Alvarez." He paused deliberately, savoring the misdirection, because to him Matteo was just another Alvarez, a name plucked from an employee file. "You've been brought here due to multiple reports of misconduct during your tenure at the Riverside branch." He slid a folder across the table. Its edge caught the light, a razor against glass. Disruptive behavior, conflict with management, financial irregularities. His words landed like stones in water, rippling through the room. One board member, a woman with a sharp jawline and colder eyes, leaned forward. "It seems you become a destabilizing element, Mr. Alvarez, perhaps even a liability." Matteo said nothing. He let them speak. Another man added, "The company cannot afford chaos at the ground level. Customers must feel safe. Staff must remain disciplined. You've undermined both." The accusations piled higher and higher, and then came the dagger. "We are considering termination," Halvorsen said, his pen hovering over the page, "unless you can present a compelling reason otherwise." The room held its breath. Matteo remained silent. The large screen at the far end of the room flickered on. Clips rolled in rapid succession. There was Matteo, standing nose to nose with Charlotte, his words spliced to make him look like an aggressor. There was a drunken customer incident, edited to show only the chaos, not the cruelty that provoked it. There was Maria, crying in the break room, Ravi slamming his hand down in frustration. Each moment stripped of context, twisted into something ugly. Board members exchanged murmurs, pen scratching notes. Disorder, instability. A pattern. Halvorsen turned back. Do you deny any of this? Matteo finally raised his head, his voice steady. I don't deny those moments happened. But what you're not seeing is why. You don't see the abuse your managers allowed, the way employees were crushed under pressure, the disrespect your customers brought through the doors. I didn't create chaos. I stopped it from consuming good people. Halvorsen smirked faintly, tapping his pen. How convenient. So you're the hero in every story. Matteo's jaw tightened. The boardroom door opened. A sharp click of shoes against the polished floor echoed, and in walked Eric, no longer in his wrinkled server uniform, now dressed in a crisp shirt, tie knotted perfectly, folder clutched in one hand, his hair slicked back, his smile carefully rehearsed. Perhaps I can add some clarity, Eric said smoothly, his voice dripping false humility. Matteo's stomach churned. Eric set the folder down with deliberate precision. As a fellow employee at Riverside, I witnessed firsthand the disruption this man caused. Staff morale has plummeted. Customers are uneasy. And frankly, leadership has become impossible under his influence. He slid photographs across the table. Receipts, emails, snippets of schedules, all twisted, highlighted, reframed to cast suspicion on Matteo. Board members leaned in, nodding gravely. Halvorsen asked, "You're certain of this?" Eric's smile widened. "Absolutely. I only want what's best for the company." Matteo watched him, silent rage burning in his chest. Eric had sold out not just him, but Maria, Ravi, Lena, everyone. For what? For a shot at power. For an hour, the interrogation dragged on. Every word Eric spoke drove nails deeper into the coffin they were building for Matteo. Every nod from the board fueled the illusion of truth. Finally, Halvorsen leaned back. His decision hovered in the air. It is a conclusion of this board that the employment of Mr. Alvarez be. Matteo moved. Slowly, deliberately, he reached up. Fingers gripped the brim of his cap. The room stilled. And in one motion, he removed it. The cap landed on the table with a soft thud. Gasps filled the room. For the first time, Matteo met their eyes without the disguise. The cap no longer shadowed his face. The faint streaks of gray in his dark hair gleamed under the fluorescent light. His deep-set eyes carried the weight of decades, not of an ordinary man, but of a leader who had built the very empire they sat in. Recognition dawned slowly, like storm clouds breaking. Murmurs rippled. "Wait! That's... It can't be!" One woman dropped her pen. Another covered her mouth in shock. Mr. Halvorsen froze, his pen suspended in midair. And Eric, his smirk shattered instantly, replaced by horror. Matteo's voice rolled through the boardroom like thunder. "I am Matteo Alvarez, CEO, founder of this company, the man whose name is on every one of your contracts. And I've been sitting in your restaurants, watching the truth you all ignored." The silence was deafening. Matteo rose to his feet, towering over the glass table. "I watched managers belittle employees until they broke. I watched customers treat staff like dirt while you counted profits. And I watched good workers, Maria, Ravi, Lena, carry entire restaurants on their backs with no recognition, no respect, no dignity." He toned, his eyes drilling into Eric. "And I watched you. You, Eric, you fed lies, stole trust, and sold your team for scraps of power. You didn't betray me. You betrayed them." Eric stammered, his voice cracking. I didn't. This isn't." Matteo cut him off, his tone icy. "You're finished here." He turned to Halvorsen. "Security." The doors opened. 2 guards stepped in, their footsteps echoing like drums of judgment. They flanked Eric, who sputtered and protested, but his words drowned in the shuffle of footsteps as he was dragged out. The doors slammed shut, and the boardroom was silent once more. Matteo faced the board, his presence filling the room. "You wanted stability? Here it is. We're cleaning house. Managers who abuse their staff will be gone. Policies that suffocate employees will be rewritten. Every branch will start putting people first, not just numbers." He let the words sink in. Because this company isn't built on glass towers and polished reports. It's built on kitchens, on servers, on dishwashers, on the people you've all forgotten. One board member tried to speak, voice trembling. But the shareholders... Matteo's gaze cut him down. The shareholders don't wash dishes at midnight. They don't bleed on the floor when short-staffed. If they want a company that survives, they'll support this change. If not... He leaned forward, his voice low and deadly serious. They can leave. That evening, Matteo returned to Riverside. The staff froze as he entered, not as a disguised trainee, but as himself, dressed sharply, no cap to hide behind. Maria's eyes widened, her mouth falling open. Ravi dropped a tray, plates shattering against the floor. "Yo," Maria whispered, breathless. Matteo nodded softly. "Yes, I'm your CEO." Shock rippled through the restaurant. Some mouths hung open. Others gasped. A few laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. But Matteo's eyes told him it was real. "I came here to see the truth," he said. "To live what you live. To feel what you feel. And I did. Every bit of it." His voice softened. "And I will not forget it. Neither will this company." Tears welled in Maria's eyes. Ravi's shoulders shook, a laugh breaking through disbelief. For the first time in a long time, hope flickered. The camera lingers on Matteo as he stands among them, not above them, but beside them. A leader stripped of disguise, yet more human than ever. His final words carry the weight of everything they've endured. Leadership is not about distance. It is about presence. It is not about comfort. It is about sacrifice. And it is not about protecting power. It is about protecting people. But here's the question every leader must answer. When power gives us the choice, do we use it to shield ourselves, or to shield those who cannot fight for themselves? His gaze lingers, steady, searching. The restaurant falls silent. The staff watch, breath held, waiting. The choice belongs to every leader. What would you choose?